Picture this. A ticket window opens for a tennis tournament in Ohio, and within minutes, something happens that nobody working in that stadium has ever seen before. Not for a rookie, not for a wild card, not for anyone ranked outside the top 10, and certainly not this fast. Because the name on that schedule belongs to a 21-year-old from the Philippines who, a year ago, most casual sports fans outside her home country had never even heard of. And now she is quietly rewriting what a ticket office in Mason, Ohio, thought it knew about demand, and that is exactly where this story begins. At the Lindner Family Tennis Center, home of the Cincinnati Open, one of the oldest and most respected stops on the entire tennis calendar. A place that has hosted legends for generations, and yet this year, the buzz isn't just about the top seeds or the defending champions, it's about a rising star named Alex, whose fan base just showed up in a way that left even the most seasoned tournament staff completely caught off guard. When the draw confirmed that Alex would be playing in Cincinnati, something shifted almost instantly. Fans didn't wait around to see how the tournament would unfold. They didn't sit on the fence hoping for a good seat later. They moved immediately, snapping up whatever tickets they could get their hands on. And the surge was so intense that even people who have run this event for years were left scrambling to understand what was happening. Cincinnati's tournament director Bob Moran, a man who has watched some of the biggest names in the sport walk through those gates, has openly admitted that he simply did not see this coming, describing the reaction from fans as something close to unbelievable. And when a veteran like that is stunned, you know something bigger is going on here than just another player having a good season. To understand why this is happening, you really have to rewind just a little back to what took place before Cincinnati even started. Weeks earlier, thousands of Filipino supporters packed out a 10,000-seat arena in Toronto. Not for a concert, not for a boxing match, but to watch their countrywoman compete in a tennis tournament, and that alone should tell you everything about the kind of connection Alex has built with her community. This wasn't a one-off moment either. It was the continuation of a pattern that had already been building through an incredible stretch of tennis that saw her capture her first ever WTA Tour singles title in Washington, and then push through to the fourth round in Toronto at a WTA 1000 event, which for those unfamiliar with tennis rankings, is about as prestigious as it gets outside of the 4 Grand Slams. So by the time she landed in Cincinnati, she wasn't arriving as some feel-good underdog story anymore. She was arriving as a legitimate threat, a woman who had just beaten a top 3 player in a final, and a fan base that had transformed from passionate to borderline unstoppable in terms of ticket demand. And here's where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't confined to just her home country anymore. Filipino communities scattered across the United States began organizing themselves to make the trip to Ohio. People traveled in from neighboring states, but also from much further away, from California all the way on one coast, to New York all the way on the other, just for the chance to watch a handful of matches in person. Think about that for a second. These aren't people casually strolling over from down the street. These are fans making real sacrifices, spending real money, taking time off work, booking flights and hotels, all built around the idea of witnessing history in the making. And that kind of devotion is exactly the sort of thing that turns an athlete into a cultural movement rather than just another name on a bracket. Inside the venue itself, the atmosphere has apparently been something else entirely, with long lines forming as fans eagerly waited just for the chance to grab tickets, which is honestly not something you typically associate with an early rounds match at a tournament that usually saves its biggest crowds for the finals weekend. But that's the thing about what's happening with Alex right now. The excitement isn't just building toward the later rounds anymore. It's there from the very first ball she strikes. Now let's rewind again briefly to Toronto, because what happened at the National Bank Open really set the stage for everything unfolding in Cincinnati. Reports from that tournament describe tickets for her second round match vanishing within minutes of going on sale. And by the time she reached the business end of that event, she was playing in front of sold-out center court crowds, not once, but 3 separate times in a row. Tournament director Carl Hale, who has presumably seen just about every kind of player pass through his event, admitted that it was genuinely rare to witness a competitor outside the top 5 in the world generate that level of demand. And the situation actually became so intense that organizers had to move her matches to the main show court entirely, simply because interest had outgrown the smaller courts she would have normally played on at that stage of a tournament. So when people say the Cincinnati ticket rush feels like deja vu, that's not an exaggeration. It's basically the same phenomenon playing out in a different city. with fans once again showing up in numbers that defied typical expectations for a player still working her way up the rankings. What's fascinating here is how quickly Alex has transitioned from being a promising young talent to something that genuinely resembles a cultural phenomenon. Former British #1 Greg Rusetsky went as far as comparing her growing star power to that of Serena Williams, specifically pointing toward the passion of the Filipino fan base that follows her from tournament to tournament no matter where she plays, which is an enormous comparison to make for any athlete, let alone someone still in the early stages of her career. And it isn't just commentators or analysts saying this either. Andy Roddick, a former world #1 himself, has publicly thrown his support behind her, stating plainly that everyone involved in tennis should be rooting for her success, and adding that if her presence on court is enough to draw in hundreds of millions of new eyeballs to the sport, that can only be a positive thing for tennis as a whole. That's a pretty remarkable endorsement coming from someone who has been at the very top of the game himself, and it speaks to something bigger than just wins and losses. It speaks to the idea that Alex is bringing an entirely new audience into a sport that has, for a long time, struggled to expand much beyond its traditional fan base. Her matches are increasingly starting to feel like something more than just tennis. They're starting to feel like celebrations, gatherings built around pride, identity, and community, where fans aren't just watching a match, they're participating in something that feels personal to them. One analyst summed it up in a way that really captures the emotional core of all this, explaining that supporters are willing to spend their hard-earned money because of who she is as a person, because of the way she carries herself and plays the game, and because there's simply something about her presence that makes people want to tune in and watch. And honestly, that's the kind of quality that can't really be manufactured. You either have that pull or you don't, and right now, it's clear that Alex has it in abundance. Now here's something that might get lost in all the noise about ticket sales and crowds, but deserves just as much attention because before she had even hit a single ball in Cincinnati, she had already made a bit of history simply by being seeded 17th in the tournament, which happens to be the highest seeding of her entire career at a WTA 1000 level event. That seeding wasn't handed to her out of sentiment either. It's a direct reflection of her climb up the world rankings, where she now sits at a career high of number 20, a remarkable achievement considering where she was standing just months earlier. And that 17th seed carries real, tangible benefits too, because in a 96-player draw, the top 32 seeds are granted a bye straight into the second round, meaning she gets to skip the chaos and unpredictability of the opening round entirely, while also gaining an extra day to rest, recover, and adjust to the conditions in Cincinnati before her tournament even begins. Her first real test will come against the winner of a matchup between Romania's Elena Gabriela Rus and Poland's Magdalena Frech, two players who will battle it out in the opening round for the right to face her. For someone whose career has been rising this fast, that seeding alone tells a story of just how far she's come in an incredibly short window of time. Just a few weeks before all of this, she was lifting her very first WTA Tour singles trophy at the Mubadala DC Open in Washington. And not just against any opponent either, but against world #3 Jessica Pegula in the final, a result that instantly propelled her to that career high ranking of 20 in the world. From there, she carried that momentum straight into Toronto, pushing all the way to the 4th round of the National Bank Open, marking the deepest run of her career at that particular level of competition. Performances like that don't just boost a ranking, they earn respect from peers. They earn attention from media outlets around the world, and they turn casual followers into devoted fans almost overnight. And now, with Cincinnati presenting yet another massive test, she's stepping into a field stacked with some of the most recognizable names in the entire sport, including world #1 Aryna Sabalenka, along with Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula once again, Coco Gauff, and Iga Swiatek. Facing that level of competition would be daunting for anyone, but for Alex, it represents another opportunity to prove that her rise isn't some fluke or short-lived hot streak, but a genuine sustained climb toward the top of women's tennis. If her 17th seed holds up through the early rounds, there's a very real possibility she could be set up for a blockbuster clash against one of the tournament's headline names in the later stages, which would only add more fuel to a story that already has the entire tennis world watching closely. And let's not forget just how significant this tournament is on its own, being one of the most prestigious events on the entire WTA calendar and holding the distinction of being the oldest professional tennis tournament still played in its original host city, which only adds more weight to what she's managing to accomplish here. But as impressive as her seeding and rankings climb have been, it's really the ticket demand around her matches that has captured the imagination of people well outside the usual tennis crowd. Bob Moran, someone who has spent years managing the logistics of a major WTA 1000 event and has watched countless big names walk through Cincinnati, including rising stars like Carlos Alcaraz, Aryna Sabalenka, and Iga Swiatek, was reportedly left almost speechless by just how intense the fan reaction has been this time around. He described it as something truly unbelievable, and for a man who has essentially seen it all in this sport, that reaction alone tells you how unusual this entire situation really is. This isn't simply about numbers on a spreadsheet either. It reflects something deeper, an extraordinary sense of loyalty from the Filipino community. A group of supporters who don't just watch from home, but actively follow her from city to city, turning her matches into full-blown events rather than just another afternoon of tennis. As one observer put it, the Filipino population has rallied behind her on a scale that has effectively made her one of the biggest sports stars to come out of the Philippines in recent memory. And when you consider the size and passion of that fan base, it starts to make a lot more sense why tournament organizers are having to rethink how they manage logistics around a single player's matches. Now the Cincinnati Open is facing a challenge that very few tournaments ever really have to deal with, which is figuring out how to accommodate the kind of demand usually reserved for the very top seeds in the draw, but generated instead by a player who, on paper, isn't even a top 20 favorite to win the whole thing. Organizers have to think carefully about which courts her matches are scheduled on, how crowd flow will work around those matches, and even how it impacts everything from concessions to merchandise sales throughout the venue. What started as simple excitement over a rising star has quietly turned into a much bigger operational conversation for the tournament as a whole, and Bob Moran's admission that he genuinely did not expect this level of demand has sparked a much wider discussion about where tennis is headed as a sport. Because what's happening here isn't just about one player having a good run of results, it's about an entirely new audience being pulled into the game. A passionate and increasingly global fan base that seems willing to follow her wherever she goes. It's a powerful reminder that talent really can emerge from anywhere in the world, and that the traditional centers of tennis power don't have a monopoly on producing genuine superstars anymore. Interestingly, the Cincinnati Open itself is a tournament that can sometimes get a little overshadowed by the build-up to the US Open, which follows shortly after, but this year, thanks in large part to the buzz surrounding Alex, it's managing to draw significant attention in its own right. That said, behind all the excitement and the headlines, there's also a very human side to this story that's easy to overlook when you're just focused on ticket sales and rankings. Because Alex has also had to prioritize her physical recovery after an absolutely grueling stretch of competition. In roughly 12 days, she played 8 matches, a demanding run that included deep tournament appearances in both Washington and Toronto. And after a stretch like that, even the most talented athletes need time to recharge before diving back into competition. So before making her way to Cincinnati, she reportedly took a short break to rest both her body and her mind, understanding that proper recovery would be absolutely essential if she wanted any chance of making another deep run once the tournament got underway. She's been open about needing that time away from the sport, explaining that she wanted to step back, reconnect with friends, and simply enjoy a bit of normal life before throwing herself back into the grind of professional tennis. She's also addressed a minor ankle issue that flared up during her run in Toronto, reassuring fans that she was feeling healthy overall and that her well-being remains her top priority moving forward, which is a refreshingly grounded perspective from someone who's currently riding one of the most explosive rises in recent tennis history. With the US Open set to begin on August 30th in New York, Cincinnati represents a crucial final proving ground before she steps onto one of the biggest stages the sport has to offer. And she appears to be approaching it with a clear and positive mindset, determined to take everything she learned from her recent stretch of tournaments and apply it even more effectively going forward. Her goal heading into these next few weeks seems refreshingly simple when you break it down. Recover properly, keep learning and improving with every match, and arrive at the US Open ready to compete at the very highest level she's capable of. And according to her own words, the incredible support she's received from fans, especially this ticket rush in Cincinnati, has become a genuine source of motivation as she prepares for the challenges ahead, giving her an extra boost of energy and confidence heading into another major tournament. She's also been quick to credit her coach, Joan Bosch, for helping guide her through the demanding and often overwhelming world of professional tennis. A reminder that behind every headline-grabbing run, there's usually a quiet support system working hard behind the scenes. Taking a step back from all of this, what's unfolding with Alex right now feels like something much bigger than just another good season on tour. It feels like the latest chapter in a story that has genuinely captivated tennis fans around the world. The story of someone who has transformed from a promising junior player into a legitimate global phenomenon, filling stadiums, uniting communities, and inspiring a whole new generation of fans who might never have paid attention to tennis otherwise. Her journey really is remarkable when you trace it back to the beginning, starting as a young girl who picked up a racket for the very first time at just 4 years old, all the way to becoming a top 20 player on the WTA Tour. And that kind of trajectory doesn't happen by accident. It's a testament to years of hard work, discipline, and an obvious natural talent for the game. One of the defining moments of her rise came back in 2022, when she became the first Filipino player ever to win a junior Grand Slam title, a result that immediately signaled she had the potential to make real history on much bigger stages down the line. Then in March of 2025, she produced a stunning run to the semifinals of the Miami Open, knocking out 3 different Grand Slam champions along the way, including Iga Swiatek, a result that firmly established her as a serious threat on the WTA Tour rather than just a promising up-and-comer. And the historic moments haven't stopped since then either, because earlier this year, she became the first Filipino player ever to win a Grand Slam singles main draw match at the US Open, before going on to reach an even bigger milestone with her breakthrough WTA Tour singles title in Washington. This so-called Alex effect has become genuinely impossible to ignore at this point, with tournament director Carl Hale revealing that her presence in Toronto alone generated more than 5,000 ticket sales, helping fill stadiums while bringing together an incredibly passionate global community of supporters. Her popularity has also started to extend well beyond just tennis results, with fans drawn not only to how she performs on court, but also to her personality, her confidence, and the genuinely inspiring nature of her overall journey. Even her fellow players have taken notice of this, with Danielle Collins publicly praising Alex, specifically highlighting how comfortable and authentic she seems in her own skin, which is a quality that tends to resonate deeply with fans regardless of what sport they're following. From history-making victories to sold-out crowds following her from city to city, her rise is quickly becoming one of the more compelling storylines in modern tennis. And Danielle Collins really summed up her appeal well, praising not just her ability on court, but also just how genuinely kind she comes across as a person. In many ways, her growing popularity represents a meaningful shift for the sport of tennis as a whole, bringing in a new generation of loyal and passionate fans, many of whom are following her journey from wherever they happen.